Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class this morning. Thank you for joining me, whether you are watching here with me live today or you are watching the recording later on. I just want to take a moment and thank you for watching this material today. So right off the bat here, just a brief announcement before we get into the things that I want to cover for today, and that's that next week will be our midterm week. So we won't have a regularly scheduled live class next week. I will be available during the live class time on Microsoft Teams or, through email or, just through any of our usual contact methods. If you'd like to ask questions or anything as we're kind of working through our midterm week next week. But since we're not doing any new content next week, we're going to take the week off from a live virtual class for next week. Good morning, Ken. Good to see you. And see, what we are talking, or we're continuing to talk about community and understanding our community. And last time we were talking here in our live class, we were talking about sort of different ways that we can build community within subgroups on, a social media platform, and how we kind of how our community isn't just necessarily this one big thing. It's full of different smaller parts. So we can utilize those different smaller parts to establish and grow a community. And so, last time that was kind of in an effort to look at that chapter from that book that I have posted in the module in a way that would be more relevant to us. And this time, we're going to be looking at some of the rest of the material from the module, specifically the SWOT analysis, SWOT, and how we can use our SWOT analysis to create smart goals for ourselves. And once we do this, we can use our SWOT analysis, create some smart goals, and this can also help us understand our social media community. So that's the goal of today, is kind of take these three maybe sort of disparate things that are in our module and link them together and make them relevant to what we're discussing here with understanding who our social media communities are. So we're going to start off by looking at the concept of a SWOT analysis, and this is something that I do in a lot of my different classes, right? So, we'll talk in the web design class, we talk about a SWOT analysis. In my computer user support class, we talk about doing a SWOT analysis. In the Web 287 e-portfolio class, which is the last class that everybody takes before they graduate, we talk about a SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is really, it's an important thing for us to do in many different aspects. And it's important for us to do here when it comes to understanding and starting to build our social media communities as well. And really the idea behind a SWOT analysis, or SWOT in general, is simple, right? For every project, for every campaign, we're talking about marketers here. In our case, social media, is a form of marketing, right? Like when we are examining social media from the perspective, right? Remember, we've talked before about how this class is, heavily business and kind of marketing forward in terms of social media, because really, like, if you're going to graduate with a degree in the programming and web development department, one of the potential career paths for you to have there, especially locally, is as a webmaster. And, managing someone's website. And really what that will extend to a lot of times is more than just managing someone's website. It goes on to managing someone's online presence, their social media presence as well. So, it's good for us to kind of understand, well, like, it's easy to post on Facebook and it's easy to post on YouTube, right? Like, it's easy just to throw something up there. But what becomes difficult is knowing, like, how, when, and why we would do certain things on social media. And that's why we kind of take this approach with this class, right? Just so we're having this idea of more of the whys and the whens and the hows of social media than just the whats. Because, where we're at today, social media is, Web 2.0 came about, a decade ago. Social media is sort of ubiquitous now. We all kind of know what it is, but the hows and the whys and all the little things about growing and getting big. And I might post this video along with some next week during our midterm week as well. And I've kind of taken a side path here. I'll get back on to SWOT analysis in just a second. But recently, within the last few weeks, I became aware of this video where they were really talking about the science of social media, right? Like, it was an individual who was very popular on YouTube, and they decided, I'm going to show people that this isn't just luck, that there's skill involved with this too. There's knowledge involved with this. And so they decided to make a brand new YouTube channel. They took anything that might be related to them off of it, right? They used a stock photo for the photo of the person that was going to be, creating the channel. They used like voiceover people to read things and do things like that, so it wasn't tied to this individual's voice. And he just followed a certain step of the hows and the whys to start this channel, and he grew it and grew the community incredibly within a very short amount of time. And, again, like, none of the people knew that it was this more popular person behind it until he made this video revealing it. The idea they're just showing that there's more of a science to all of this than you might think. And a lot of that science does fall into this idea of marketing, such as it is. And so as, social media marketers, we're going to analyze our strengths, or we're going to analyze our strategies based on 4 specific quadrants. And, I've also got the video in the module there where I've kind of drawn out the quadrant diagram there of how all these relate together. And we talk about, their interior factors and their exterior factors and their positive factors and their negative factors. Right, so that's all in that video in the module, and I'll go into that a little bit here as well. But these 4 quadrants are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. SWOT, right? That's our acronym there that makes up our SWOT analysis. So, we're going to focus on, this sort of professional social media marketing sort of focused use of a SWOT analysis. We're really based on the definition here. We're talking about for every campaign and project, right? So we can do this for basically anything. When I talk about the SWOT analysis in Web 287, I talk about a personal SWOT analysis, right? And when we talk about like, what are your weaknesses that might, impair you from getting a job that you want, and that sort of thing. So we can utilize this SWOT analysis in different formats to kind of help us break down any big move, any big campaign or project or anything that we might want to do in our lives, either professionally or personally. For this particular presentation, again, we're going to take this sort of professional social media marketing type of approach to it. But it is something that can be used in a broader sense. And so we talked about these 4 SWOT factors: our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And so we can kind of just go into them just a little bit more and give some examples here of what could be a strength or weakness, an opportunity or a threat, depending on the situation. Right? And so strengths are just what you're doing well, right? So when we're approaching our strengths and the idea of our strengths, what are we doing well? What are we good at? What are the things that we know? What are the things that we can do? What are the advantages or strengths that you can boast as a brand? Right? So more than just you, although, you know, a lot of our like project focused stuff for this class is individualized. But if we were to kind of expand that out into the area of corporations and businesses and professional social media marketing and things like that, you know, we're getting to the idea back of the brand again. So what kind of features or advantages does the brand have over other brands, right? What makes that brand something that's going to be desirable within a certain community? Right? So like the example here is we have a definitive brand voice and an active community. And so in doing so, we can draw a lot of conclusions from this, right? We can say that, you know, a definitive brand voice means that we've kind of unified, we have this unified vision, and we're carrying it across our different platforms, and we're utilizing it to communicate to an audience well, and we know we are utilizing it to communicate to an audience well. You know, a lot of like what we talked about last week when we're kind of building and understanding and building our audience. If we're communicating to our audience with a definitive brand voice, then we can achieve this active community, right? Because we have this through line that we can use to connect all of our platforms, that we can make ourselves identifiable on the different platforms, and we can engage our community in that sort of way and move them down that funnel, get them to a place of activity. So if you're able to do this, this is definitely a strength for you. However, on the flip side, if you're not as good at this, right, or if you have some other areas where you might be lacking in, you know, that's a weakness, right? And so where your business might be lacking, or where your social media presence might be lacking, you know, whatever we mean there when we say business, right? Because again, we can use this in different contexts, but, you know, we're focusing on this social media marketing aspect. So wherever your organization might be lacking in presence, the internal factors that can hold you back from reaching your goals, right? And these are you know, budget can be one of these. A lack of skills can be one of these. You know, like we'd like to be able to do X, but we don't know how to do whatever. Right? And so we look at these strengths and weaknesses, and they are, you know, in a sense, kind of what we would believe them to be just by hearing the word strengths and weaknesses, right? The things that we're good at and the things that we are lacking at that need improvement. And these are our internal factors, right? And like, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, I said in that video in the module, I break down the internal factors, and these are the internal factors. These are the things that we have kind of under our control. Because we can identify our own strengths, we're identifying our own weaknesses. These are things that are kind of in-house, if you will. So we term these as internal factors. And so when we have these things that are internal factors, we can use these things and identify these things as means to use in other areas, right? Because we have control over them. So I can take my list of strengths and I can say, okay, we're good at this, we're good at this, we're good at this. I can parlay that into presence on this site. You know, we're good at relating to people. I can start talking to users directly and getting information from them, or we're good at, you know, getting surveys out. Like that's one of your lab assignments for this module is to just send out a survey, see what you get back from it. You know, I'm good at sending surveys out and being able to take data and interpret the data results, and we can use that data to kind of help understand our community and start building these, you know, we can learn opportunities from this data that we're building, right? We'll get there in just a second, right? But I'm good at crafting this to where we can get that information, so I know that I can push that direction. Or, you know, conversely, weaknesses, like these are areas that you're self-identifying as weaknesses. These are the areas that are, keeping you from that goal state. So whenever we talk about like going from a problem state to a goal state, there are always pitfalls, there are always things that can kind of get in your way that, might prevent you from doing that. And, if they are internal things, if they are things that you can identify as areas for improvement in yourself or in your organization, then we term those as weaknesses. And, again, internal factors, in terming them as weaknesses, we're identifying them as things that we can also work on. If we can identify that they need improvement, then we can start to improve. And our internal factors here of strengths and weaknesses, they really require a lot of introspection. If you're doing a personal SWOT analysis, it's a lot of personal introspection, and that's hard for an individual to do. If it is a corporate, a business SWOT analysis, a social media marketing type of SWOT analysis, then, it requires a lot of introspection at a company level or an organizational level. And that's difficult for people to do, right? Introspection in general, being able to kind of look inward and kind of being honest with yourself, even about things that you're good at, right? Because by and large, we always kind of want to be, I think people in general might want to be a little bit modest, might have a little bit of imposter syndrome and think, they're not as good at certain things as they might actually be. But then on the flip side of that, we don't necessarily think that we're as bad as at some things as we might actually be. So, sitting kind of with yourself and kind of really analyzing these factors, whether it's personally or in business, right, is difficult, and it's difficult to be, kind of honest with ourselves, and it's going to raise, it might even raise some emotions, based on, whatever the situation is. And so those are our two internal factors, but we also have these two external factors, which are opportunities and threats. And so these are things that are kind of happening around you that you don't have direct control over, but it's important to be aware of them, because there are also things that are either presenting themselves as a benefit or a possible obstacle for you to be able to achieve your goals. So our opportunities, this is, the incentive, what's the incentive of your campaign, or what's the incentive of your social media marketing push? What do you have to gain? And I think that's key there. What do you have to gain, and what is possible? And I think, that's one of the big things that we kind of want to do with, like, the surveying type of situation that we're doing in this module, is just to kind of help identify some of these opportunities and threats. Because with our strengths and weaknesses, right, like, that helps us understand ourselves or our own companies really well. But with our opportunities and threats, this is what helps us understand what's around us really well, what's surrounding us really well. And it's this where we start to understand our community a little bit better as well, right? When we can look and see, well, is there a market that nobody's really doing, that is out there, that, we have the strengths to support, that we can easily push into this opportunity? And that opportunity could be an audience. It could be an age group, a gender, somebody that's typically underserved by a similar or similar campaigns. Right? Like, oh, nobody's really making social media educational videos for older people, right? Like, that's, and, maybe you would have the skills in doing that. So I can sit there and I can make my videos and I can put them online and I can push them in that direction. So I might, based on that opportunity there, I might also think, well, my goal here is to reach the older populations. So I might, utilize other social media platforms that older populations tend to be on as well. These would be things like Facebook. Maybe LinkedIn would be a good one here, depending on what exactly your audience is and what exactly the type of content is that you're trying to present. And so it's these opportunities where we can start to identify these places where we can fit in. Any kind of new leads, any kind of brand awareness, like maybe we're actually more popular than we thought we are. Us as individuals just starting a new project here, right? That's probably not something we're going to discover. But you might think that, oh, you're kind of a middle of the road brand out there, this company, not so many people use you, but maybe it's just because you've never asked the right questions and you don't know exactly who your audience is and how many people use your product. And so when you start pushing and looking for these opportunities and you see that, hey, we're actually out there more than we thought we were. Like, people actually know of us. A lot more people actually know of us more than we thought we did. We have a lot more people further down that funnel than we thought we did. We can start to do some bigger stuff because we have more support kind of backing us up out there with an audience. And then threats, that's our external or outside forces that can hinder your efforts. Competition, conditions of the economy, right? Like, these are things that are out of your control. Competition especially, like, if you start to make these videos that I was talking about, like, oh yeah, social media marketing videos for older people. People see that. People see it's popular. And of course, it's one of those situations where it's like, oh, it's popular, I can do that too. And so I'm going to introduce competition into the market. And now, where you found a little place to fill in, it's starting to get crowded because more and more people are also trying to wedge into that space. And so it's important, and we'll mention this again later on, but it's important that we're not just doing these SWOT analyses just one time and just letting it go. We want to do these kind of periodically just to see what's changed. Right? Because none of these things are static here, right? Like, you grow and you learn things and you gain strength over time. Sometimes you let some things slide by, like if you don't work a muscle, it'll atrophy, right? And so, like, if you're not engaged in a certain area, you'll forget about some things that are important to that area. And so, that might create a new weakness that you didn't have before. Opportunities change constantly. Threats change constantly. So it's important for us to not just look at these SWOT factors once and be done, but, look at them fairly regularly. I'd say at least like every 6 months. Just kind of take a brief sit down, even if it's not formal, even if it's just like kind of thinking through things in your head. And just kind of determining, well, what's changed, what's different now, what kind of different directions do I need to go into, and so on. But again, one of the big things for us to kind of remember out of this is that, we have these internal factors, right? And these internal factors are things that we can control. And those are our strengths and weaknesses. Conversely, we have our external factors, which are opportunities and threats. These are, things that are out of our control, that are surrounding us, but they do impact us and they impact our audience and who, is going to be watching us or following us in a big way. We have our positive factors, which are going to be our strengths and opportunities. And we have our negative factors, which are going to be our weaknesses and our threats. And so that's why when we, kind of build this SWOT analysis out, we build it out in that sort of quadrant sort of thing, like you see in the in the video in the module. Because our strengths and opportunities are related as our strengths and weaknesses are related. Our threats and weaknesses are related as our opportunities and threats are related, just in slightly different ways, right? And so, as we're kind of thinking about all of this, we want to kind of think about what these things are and how it might impact our efforts and how it might impact our audience. Right, so that's our SWOT factors. That's kind of the what of our SWOT. But why SWOT? I've got 3 big areas here for us to cover. One is that they allow us to set smarter goals, right? And it's these SMART goals that we'll be talking about in just a second that really helps us understand our audience, who our audience is, and why we'd want to be going in that direction. Another thing they do is they kind of force us to dig into our data. We'll mention this briefly here. We'll be talking in more depth about analytics and data after the midterm. So we'll kind of just introduce that topic now and then get deeper into it later on. And it also applies to other areas, right? Like you can take the strengths from this one campaign and apply it to other factors where, things might be a little different. But the first thing that we want to do here is we want to set smarter goals. SMART here being an acronym as well, right? This is a certain framework for building goals that actually helps us build good goals. Right? So doing a SWOT analysis kind of gives us a framework to create SMART goals in a manner that's realistic. And I think that's important right there, in a manner that's realistic. Because when we're talking about goal setting here, if we use our strengths in conjunction with our weaknesses, our opportunities in conjunction with our threats to set goals, we're not just setting these kind of pie in the sky goals, right? Like I think if we just look at our opportunities or we just look at our strengths, we can take and try to set goals that are unrealistic for ourselves to achieve. Right? Because we're only looking at the positives and we're not looking at the negatives. We're not looking at the things that could hinder us. But kind of having this understanding of where your struggles might be. And some threats that you could avoid along the way, kind of where you can avoid putting yourself into a situation where you can't meet your goals. Right? Because that's only going to get even further discouraging. So, utilizing the SWOT analysis to help us set more realistic goals using our SMART goal setting framework is actually going to give us goals that we can achieve, right? And then we can just kind of move the ball forward, right? Like to some degree, it's like football in this case, right? Like sometimes you go for the big passes and you try to, make a big play happen. Sometimes you're just doing short run plays and moving the ball 2 to 3 yards at a time. Right? Because if I can move the ball 3 yards at a time, that's 12 yards every 4 downs. If I can move the ball 3 yards at a time, I can just keep on moving that ball, keep on getting that first down. And eventually just move it right into the end zone there. Right? So, if we can set smarter goals utilizing our SWOT analyses, then our goals, we might just be moving the ball just 3 yards at a time. We might not be making that, bomb pass, Hail Mary play. But we can, small victories amount to large ones over time. Right? And, that is something that a lot of people hate when it comes to social media, right? Because we are kind of in this age of instant gratification, and a lot of people will talk about it in terms of younger people, but everybody wants instant gratification, right? Like that's just kind of who we are as human beings, right? As fast as things can be good for me, I want that to happen. And so there are people who want to get on YouTube and get 100,000 subscribers in the first couple of months, and that's unrealistic. right? It's a lot better if we kind of set some smaller goals, set some SMART goals, set some attainable goals. You know, maybe we want to just start by just being able to gain some consistency, right? Like when you turn in your posting log here next week for the first time, I'm not necessarily going to expect a lot of consistency here, right? Like what I want to see in big differences between the midterm and the final is growth and improvement. So maybe you don't have a video a week for every week for the first couple of weeks here. You know, maybe you're missing some of that. But then in the second half of the class, maybe you start to pick things up and you start to, you know, maybe you're doing 2 or 3 short videos in a week instead of, you know, one semi-longish type of video, and you're starting to become more consistent and you're starting to move the ball down the field. Right? And I fully expect that as we are analyzing our opportunities, we might learn that our audience might be in a different place. And so we might have to move from one platform to another platform midstream. Because, you know, where we thought they might be initially, they're just not there. Right? And we want to take our message, we want to take what we're doing wherever our people are. Right? So as we kind of learn and grow, we're going to be able to conduct these analyses better. We're going to be able to set these goals better. We're going to be able to move the ball down the field. And then by the end of the semester, we might have some goals achieved that prove success. But these SMART goals, as I said, this is another acronym, right? It's acronym Wednesday this morning. SMART, S-M-A-R-T, gives us a framework for goal setting. One is that we need to be, so S stands for specific. We need to be specific. We need to make sure we know why we want to achieve our goal and what we need to do to achieve that goal. And I think that question of why here is really tough. Why do we want to do this? For some people, it's super easy, right? For some people, they know exactly why. Like it's something that you're passionate about and you know immediately, like, I want to do this because it meets this need, or it does this thing, or it helps people in a way that they've never been helped before. So for some people, the why is really easy. For some people, the why is more difficult. But we want to make sure that we're kind of understanding why. Why do we want to achieve this goal? Why do we want to do this? And what do we need to be able to do it? What do we need to do? Does that mean posting on Facebook? Does that mean posting on YouTube? Does that mean posting on Twitter, Instagram? Does that mean posting multiple times? Right? What does that mean in terms of what we need to do to be able to achieve our goals? M is that it's measurable. The outcome of your goals should be able to be measured. Now, this could be as easy as I want to post 3 times a week to Twitter, or I want to post daily to Instagram, right? There's an objective there. There's something measurable there that you can go back and quantify and assess. It could be a more abstract goal, right? That might have some more things surrounding it. Like, I want to get 1,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2022. Right? Just hypothetically. And so that's a measurable goal, right? That's a measurable goal that has quantifiable outcomes. But the hows of that are a little cloudier, right? Like, they involve several smaller things that kind of build to this bigger thing. And so what we might want to do there as we're creating goals is we might want to kind of tier our goals or build our goals on top of one another, right? So we can say, like, I want 1,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2022. And then here's another set of goals that I'm going to do based on my SWOT analysis. I'm going to build them based on my SWOT analysis that's going to help me achieve this other goal, right? Like, I discovered I have an opportunity for a particular age group, so I'm going to post on that. So I'm going to post on platforms that are specific for that age group 2 to 3 times a week or daily, or, kind of whatever you determine your needs can be based on some of the best practices and things that we've talked about in the past. It could be running something like advertising, right? Like, we're not requiring any advertising in this course. I don't expect you to run any advertising for any of your project stuff. That would be crazy, right? To pay money for that. But in a professional scenario, you might want to run paid ads on these specific platforms to try to get your message in front of people. As long as you have a good return on investment, right? Like, I have a friend that has a business, did pretty decent in the business, did much, much better when they started targeting Facebook ads to a certain segment of the population that they kind of figured out wanted or would want his product. And all of a sudden, sales went through the roof, right? And we get a return on investment there, an ROI. But again, we don't really talk about advertising in particular in this class because, it's kind of outside the scope. But it is one of the things that, we could bring into this conversation as well, because, this presents measurable metrics that we could get into. Attainable. I think the first part of this sentence here below attainable is just as important as the second part. Challenge yourself, but your goals should not be impossible to reach. Make goals that you think will challenge yourself, but are still attainable, that are still things that you can do, right? Because if we just set super easy goals for ourselves that, like, we know we can do without even trying, then we're not going to grow. And I think, in any process, in any sort of project or trying to do whatever we're doing, I think growth is a part of that project. Just personally, that way, if we do it again, we do it better. Right? So if we just set super easy goals where we can achieve them without even trying, we're not going to see that growth. But if we're setting goals that are unattainable, that's going to discourage us. So what we want to do is we want to set attainable goals. We want to make sure that, we're challenging ourselves at the same time. And then when we achieve that goal, one of the things that we don't talk about here because it's after the goal, but when we achieve a goal, take the win. Accept the victory. All right, like, if there's 2 things that me personally, that I have a lot of problems dealing with when it comes to accepting them, they are victories and praise. It's really weird when I get a win and I'm trying to kind of process it and deal with it. I don't really like, it's kind of weird to me, right? And so that's one of the places where I've kind of set some of my goals is, being able to accept victories when I can achieve them. And take them in and reflect on them and actually appreciate them for what they are. And I think that's something that can kind of help us push forward and help us, move the ball the next 3 yards, right? And so, again, relevant. That's the next one. R is relevant. Your goals should be related to your results. So you're finding out these things using your SWOT analysis. You're finding out where your strengths are. You're finding out where your weaknesses are, where your opportunities are, where your threats are. And so these are the things that makes our goals here, our SMART goals. These are the things that makes them relevant, right? Because we're backing them up with strengths, or we're creating goals to counter weaknesses, or we're creating goals to move toward opportunities, right? And all of these things, again, in our SWOT analysis, that's going to be related to our social media efforts. So if we're using that SWOT analysis as the foundation for building these SMART goals, building the relevancy is going to come directly from that SWOT analysis. And T is time oriented. Have a deadline. Set a deadline for your goal. That deadline could be close, that deadline could be far away, but the thing about deadlines is that they always come. Right? And if we set a deadline, that incentivizes us and that moves us toward progression. Right? Without a deadline, we can just kind of spin our wheels. But when we start to set deadlines for ourselves and then trying to keep those deadlines, that's going to be motivation for progress. That's going to be things that can, move us to take action. Because we're going to hold ourselves accountable for these SMART goals, right? We have to hold ourselves accountable. And if we hold ourselves accountable to achieving these goals, and then when we do achieve these goals, we take a minute and reflect on the victory, right? Accept the victory and reflect on the victory, then we're going to be better off. So setting SMART goals allows us to kind of provide direction with where we want to go in social media, right? We're building this upon the foundation of our SWOT analysis. So based on that analysis, we have our different strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And then we can build them into goals that's going to point us in a certain direction. And since it is social media, the direction in general is community. It's, doing all the stuff that we were talking about previously and the stuff that we'll be talking about after the midterm week in creating and building community. Finding out who our community is, what their interests are, what their needs are, creating goals based on our SWOT analyses to push that direction of meeting our audience, meeting our users, whatever we want to call them, where they are, and providing them the things that they need. So who is this audience? What do they need? Where are they at? Why do we want to reach out to them? What can we offer them? That's community in a nutshell, right? And that's the big overarching kind of idea here of what we're getting out of these SWOT analyses and these SMART goals, right? Specifically the opportunities in our SWOT analyses and building goals to meet those opportunities. Because the opportunity is in our community. It also allows you to define the whys of your social media presence, which is saying, like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I want to do this? What am I offering to people? Just having these generalized goals in addition to our specific, manageable, attainable, timely goals. It's important because it gives us focus, it gives us clarity, it gives us an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, for who we are doing it for. The next thing is that it allows us to dig into data. And when we talk about digging into data here, it not just allows us to do that, but it kind of requires us to do that, because to be able to figure out our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we have to look at some quantifiable data there, right? Like we talked about doing things that are quantifiable, doing things that we can put a value on or a number on. And so we need hard data to support quantifiable goals. And so maybe not for the initial goal setting, but definitely for the future of what we're trying to do with our SWOT analyses and doing these different things, we're going to need to utilize our analytics. And we are going to be looking at analytics in more depth and detail in, I can't remember if it's module 5 or 6 right off the top of my head, but it's coming up fairly quickly after the midterm. And, initially we might not have any data. We might not have any analytics. We might just have some data that we might get from, say, a survey like you're doing in this module, right? And you can start by building off of things like that. But then the more that you build and the more that you start to grow and do things from there, you'll get social media analytics, which we will look at them again in greater detail later on. So I'm just going to kind of put a pin into this for the time being, right? The big thing to get out of being able to dig into data here is that your data, just like your goals, are going to change, right? Your strengths are going to change, your weaknesses are going to change, your opportunities are going to change, your threats are going to change, your goals are going to change as you move the ball down the field. Your data is going to change. All of this stuff is constantly changing. So again, it's important to reiterate that we have to reassess regularly. And my rule of thumb is like every 6 months. For you, it might be more, it might be less, just depending on your situation, right? Again, SWOT, and the third thing that our SWOT analysis applies to is that we can use it to apply it to other areas, right? Especially for the purposes of the project of this course. This stuff isn't going to be as important, right? But again, if we're utilizing it in conjunction with a brand, in conjunction with a company, identifying social media strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats can expand out into other areas, right? Like merchandise, products. If we discover through, examining our audience and kind of understanding our audience, the things that they like and the things that they don't like about our company, we might learn from that some other things like, I need to stop making this product because everybody hates it, or I need to improve this product because everybody, hates this one particular feature, or we need to make more of this product because people really love it, or make something similar to it. So the merchandise or the products that we make and the business services that we provide can be directly related to our social media SWOT analysis, because the things that we discover aren't just necessarily isolated to social media. Because, it starts on social media, but at the end of that other computer, at the end of that other phone, right, there's a real human being that exists in the regular world, and they buy products. They buy services. And if they're loyal to you and they're loyal or loyal to your company, or to get them that way, right, you're going to want to make sure that you're providing the merchandise and business services to meet their needs. And we can discover where that lies through the social media SWOT analysis to allow us to understand our community even better, right? And we talk about website search engine optimization here, which is more directly related, right? Like I can use keywords that I've determined are meaningful to my audience and start using them on my website to start getting them ranked higher in the Google search rankings and the Yahoo search rankings, right? And so since the vast majority of you don't need a website, not using a website for the purposes of this course, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that is a good purpose for that. Another huge thing here is, that this really aligns your social media presence with your overall organizational vision. So it takes that online brand and it connects it to your real world brand, puts them together. And that's super significant. And we can see here This is from sproutsocial.com in a survey that they did of social media practitioners and social media marketing leaders. They were looking at, different SWOT analyses that they had done, and they were looking at their top challenges or their top, we can kind of look at this in different ways, right? We can look at this as a weakness. We can look at this as a threat. We can also kind of look at these as opportunities, depending on how we want to frame them. But we can see here that 45% of all of the practitioners surveyed identifying and understanding the target audience to be one of the biggest challenges. And 51% of the leaders identified developing social strategy to support business goals as one of the biggest challenges. And when we're talking about leaders here, we're talking about people in a management role. So we're not necessarily talking about, people who are actively working in social media, but they're managing social media practitioners. So their goals and their ideas are different. But when we look at these largest segments, we see the biggest things that are important to us in regard to understanding a community with SWOT analysis and goal setting. Right? It's going to help us identify and understand that target audience. It's going to help us develop a social strategy to support our goals. Right? That's what we've been talking about here for the prior 50 minutes. Is essentially what we can do with SWOT analysis and what we can do with setting smart goals that are going to help us achieve these things, that the top challenges that practitioners and leaders in social media marketing say that they're facing. So we can kind of put a bow on this, kind of wrap it up neatly with one slide here. And that's just using our SWOT analysis to better understand community. Because by understanding our goals, the goals that we're setting, using our SWOT analysis to set smart goals, we're able to create a unified message. A message that we can take across all platforms. We're able to solidify that brand that we talked about a few weeks ago. And solidify it across all platforms, a unified message, a unified brand identity that we take from YouTube to Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, wherever we go, right? Wherever we decide our presence is needed based on our audience. And we can take a unified vision, a unified message across all these platforms. Because we know our SMART goals. We've examined our SWOT analyses. We know where our audience is, and we know what our audience needs. So with this unified message, we're better able to understand who we want to hear that message, or who we might think needs to hear that message. Because it's probably not going to be everybody, right? It's unlikely that every single person needs to hear your social media message. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, right? But we can help elucidate who this audience is, where this audience is at, so we can take this unified message to them wherever they're at, whatever social media platform that is. And we already have our goals and our opportunities in mind going into that situation. And so when we understand who needs to hear that message and where they are, we can tailor our online presence to that audience in an effort to start achieving those goals and building that audience, building our community. Right at the end of the day, that's the overarching thing that kind of gets us from the beginning to the end with creating and utilizing a SWOT analysis and setting goals. And so that's the last slide on my slide deck. So that's really all that I have for you for today. We're right up here against the 1 hour mark. So that is just fine with me. Just as a reminder, once again, next week we will not be having our typical live session because it will be our midterm week. We'll pick up with the live sessions again week after next. So we won't be out of practice for long. And again, I will be available for questions and things during our usual time during midterm week if you have them. So we're going to put the music on, just take any questions if anybody has them today. Put the music on for a couple minutes. And I'll hang out in the chat and answer any questions I need to there. But that's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. And we will see you next time.